You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Faith in Sport, wherever, whenever, and however you are joining us. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. You're listening to Radio Maria. Thank you for joining us today on this day, Faith in Sport, where we apply our faith to all aspects of sport. Here's what we're going to do today. Talk today's sports topics, including our hit and miss with Ed Billick, longtime friend. For years has been a special guest on this program, radio veteran. He's going to join us just in 1 minute. Special guest is going to be Deacon Bob Pierce, Diocese of Charleston, a permanent deacon at St. Mary Help of Christians in Aiken, South Carolina, and the organizer of Life Runners. So basically, it's a ministry within our faith, but they run to bring a lot of attention to this issue of the unborn. And Bob is going to join us and tell us how he got a chapter started at his parish in Aiken, South Carolina. We're going to do weekend headlines, and we're going to wrap the whole thing up with Q&A with Dr. A. First, folks, let's bring on our special guest for the day, Ed Billick. Ed, as always, brother, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're with me today.
Well, I tell you what, John, it's always good to be back with you here on Radio Maria, and it gives me a burst of energy on this afternoon when we're recording this show. And God bless you and the work you do and the work you have been doing for many, many years with your public speaking skills, as well as the work you do here with Radio Maria.
I appreciate that. Those words there, brother. This show could go on, but I am so glad that you do it with me just about each and every week. It just brings me energy. I think it brings the show a great deal of insight. It's always good to have two minds rather than my little one here. But either way, brother, I appreciate your faith. I appreciate your knowledge of sport. I appreciate your professionalism on air. Let's go ahead and get started with our show. Hit or miss, something good or positive, negative, or other in the world of sport. As always, you go first. What do you have for us, a hit or a miss?
Well, there's one person that I know who gives me spiritual advice from time to time, or has these expressions. And recently, the Carolina Panthers fired their head coach, Frank Wright, a good man of faith. He's had some theological seminary experience like you, not into Catholic faith, but he's a strong Christian. Well, there's this comment this friend of mine uses once in a while, and I think it applies to a lot of us. Is this a hit or a miss? I guess the miss may be a hit. Because what he says is rejection is God's direction. He said man's rejection, and God often uses man's rejection to redirect his people back into his will for their lives. And so many of our listeners, and you think about it, that maybe a place or during your life where you were rejected and it crushed you, and you go, why didn't I get that job? Why didn't I get that promotion? Why this didn't happen? Why that didn't happen? But years later, you see, the good Lord had his hands directing you to something better, something more powerful, something better for you, something better for the family. And that hit me, John, when the Panthers fired Coach Frank Wright. Good man of faith. But I think God is telling him, you can go out and lead a bunch of football guys and win games, but I got something bigger for you in life. So it'll be most interesting to see where God takes his hand, where God's hand is directed into something bigger.
That's a great point, brother. I think a lot of people, as they get older and their faith gets stronger, they see the writing on the wall, and they see that what they're doing in their kind of everyday life with their jobs isn't all that meaningful to themselves. It's not all that meaningful to God, and maybe that's true, brother. I think that's great insight. He was a guest on the show a couple years ago when he was the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, as you remember, and it just came out. He's a man of faith. He respects people that are faithful. I think that's what drove him to be a guest on the show when we requested he come on. I think he should look at that. I shouldn't say should. Maybe he will look at that. I don't know the man all that well, but that might be something that will be tugging at his heart. Say that saying again. Man's rejection is?
Well, man's rejection is meant to redirect his people back into his will for their lives. Rejection is God's redirection. Man's rejection is God's redirection. So, and he may not even know it's occurring when it does. Like for many of us,
that's right.
We look back and say, gosh, I'm glad I didn't take that move to Indiana, or I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be on the show with John Acquaviva.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, brother.
The Lord directs us in many ways. So
no, in fact, this goes right along that saying of, when a door opens, a window opens, or vice versa. And I think that's what you're kind of saying here. But you're adding that major component to it is what is God's will, and I think that would be a really good thing to.
And finally, God interprets our journey to put us on His path, a different direction. We may not see it for as it is, but it's there, and it's good because He is good always.
God bless you, brother. I love it.
Yeah, folks, I plagiarized there a little bit. That comes from a friend of mine, but I think I didn't make that up. I think it's deep insight.
No, it is. It's great, and I thought that was a good segue because, the local guy to our sports team here, Frank Reich. I thought he'd be here at least a year, but I tell you that organization's got some reflecting to do, don't they, brother? How many head coaches have they had in the last just couple of years alone?
To include the interim, 6 head coaches. Ron Rivera, a Catholic man,
in less than 5 years.
I think Ron's going to be doing something different too.
I think you're right. So maybe the saying should be, man's rejection is God's redirection for head coaches in the NFL. Folks, you're listening to Radio Maria. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Our special guest today is Ed Billick. You probably recognize that voice as much as you recognize mine. Ed's with us just about each and every time we do this show. Ed and I, folks, are in the middle of doing our hit or miss, something that is positive or negative, something that's good or bad within the world of sport, or kind of directs us along this line of just talking about morality and ethics and character as they relate to sport. Mine's a good one, brother. Mine's a big hit. This needs a little bit of background, but I think you're going to appreciate it. Okay. The coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes is Ryan Day. And last week, of course, was the big Ohio State-Michigan game. Just to let you know, it was not only a big game every year. I think in most polls, it's ranked as the number 1 rivalry in all of sport, not just college football.
Absolutely.
And it was number 2, Ohio State, against number 3, Michigan. So the viewership was greater than it had been in almost 20 years. Oh. So this is a big deal, right? The winner likely goes on to the college football playoff, which we're going to get to in a minute. The 4 teams that can play for the national championship. And during the game, Ed, in fact, toward the end of the game, Zach Zinter, sounds like a cartoon character, Zach Zinter, an offensive lineman, and the best offensive lineman Michigan has, and they're known for their great linemen over the last couple of years, had a gruesome injury. He had to be carted off the field. The game was delayed for about 15 minutes when they carted him off.
Remember that.
And after the game, it's not quite clear exactly when Ryan Day, the coach of Ohio State, the opponent's player, Zach Zinter, plays for Michigan, but it was reported that he went into the tunnel where Zach Zinter had been taken into the ambulance and eventually to the hospital. He saw Ryan Day, Zach Zinter's parents, and he embraced them, and he wished their son well, and he just said he was sorry that it happened. And I thought that was a great gesture. That was pure respect out of the opponent. It was pure respect for the moment. And he made that situation bigger than the game itself. And the reason that that's so big is that is not just a rivalry, Ed, as you know. It's a bitter rivalry. And those 2 teams don't have a whole lot of good things to say to one another and for each other. They usually talk against one another, or they don't talk about each other at all. And further, the reason that was so respected on my part, and I think a lot of people's part, is that this was the 4th game in which Ryan Day coached this great rivalry, and it was the 3rd time he lost, and he was losing at the time. So I thought it was a great gesture on his part. What do you think about that, brother?
When you shared that with me, I'm thinking, yep, life is much bigger than a game of football. And because that young man on that stretcher, his injury was caused by one of the players on this coach, Ohio State's team. The responsibility to go over and, just be warm with his folks, be there. I think that's big time. And that is a big hit for you. I mean, to talk that, because you're such a Michigan fan, but right. Be that as it is, it's life is much bigger than just a game of football, no doubt. And that was pure class. That's class action.
Yeah. It's kind of unfortunate. I bet you are full agreement with this. The time that the athletes, especially in football, they seem to like understand the gravity of the situation and get the overall picture is when players are injured, whether it's a teammate of theirs, a teammate or an opponent from the other team. Regardless, when a serious injury happens, it does seem to refocus them and put things into perspective. And that was a clear situation of that. The game was really tight at the time. Ohio State was on their way to lose a really close game, but he still had, even if it happened in the moment or was after the game, even after the game, it would have been even more meaningful. So kudos to Ryan Day, the head coach of Ohio State. And I thought that was a great move of humanity, great move of sportsmanship. And it's much appreciated, especially from folks here at Radio Maria and in particular, Faith and Sport.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, brother, one of the things that I try to do, but just not very often, is talk pure sport. And that is when it has nothing to do with character, ethics, or morality. But I thought it was worth giving a few minutes to the big story of the weekend, which was the conference championships were played. And this usually determines who's going to go to, or it says a great deal about who's going to go into the 14 playoff. And the big thing, Ed, was Florida State University, my alma mater. I did my PhD at Florida State, and they were the first team in the history of this 10-year college football playoff to win their conference, to go undefeated, and be in a Power 5 conference. And they were left off of that 14 playoff for the first time in its 10-year history, and Alabama slipped in instead. What are your thoughts on them not getting into the playoff?
Well, it was a shock, no doubt. And I was watching it as it unfolded, and I just said, it's all about TV revenue. It's all about money. Alabama, Michigan would be a more enticing matchup.
That's right.
Because whether it's the Alabama's become the New York Yankees for many people, it's the team you like to hate. I hate using that word because that's not a good word with us Catholics, but so it was one of those money plays the role here. Yeah, I felt bad for the head coach, Mike Norvell, for Florida State. Good guy, fired up. I feel sorry for the students. And it just begs the question that after, and you and I have had these discussions before, after a full season of playing all these games, what are you playing them for? Well, you want to win the championship. You go undefeated. What more can you do? And I don't care if you're on your third string quarterback. Quarterback makes some of the difference, but how about for all the other players that played very hard, all the defense, offensive line, wide receivers, all those folks? You feel bad for it. Will the 12-team playoff next year, John, change things? I don't know.
To a degree it will, because teams like that will be allowed into the playoff, and the argument will be not in the top 4, but the people that are 13 and 14th still looking in. Everybody's always going to be looking in. They could go to 20 teams, 30 teams. Somebody's always going to be looking in. But I thought...
Yeah, and you and I were talking. I sent you the video, folks, and go to look at Washington State's head football coach, Mike Leach. He put a little something out on X today, formerly known as Twitter. So this is the only time when a committee makes a decision who goes to the playoffs. Now, Major League Baseball, NFL, National Hockey League, NBA, it's based off your record. Yeah. And here he's funny because you got a committee sitting down at the resort drinking cocktails, and guys don't even know the game of football. They've never played, and they're making the decisions. I mean, so that's so unlike how the rest of the sports out there, especially the professional sports. You brought up the point that the NCAA basketball is 68 teams, and a committee probably helps decide which ones. But the degree of error for 68 is very small compared to picking 4. Your thoughts?
Agreed. In fact, I'll finish the conversation with this, and this is to the committee's credit. You know who Florida State is matched up against in the bowl game, right?
Yeah, Georgia.
Okay, so Georgia was number 1. They lost to Alabama. Alabama creeps into it. Georgia falls out. So it's Florida State against Georgia. Did you hear what the point spread is?
Well, I think it's pretty large. What is it?
14 points, saying that Georgia's going to win that game by. And that, to the committee's credit, Ed, says a lot about at least what Las Vegas thinks about the skill of Florida State.
If it would have been Alabama playing Florida State in that 5-6 matchup, would the point difference be that great? No, it would have been less. It probably would have been less. Georgia's a better team than Alabama.
You think that even after?
Oh, absolutely. When I say Alabama, says I thought it was going to be Georgia if they were going to try to work TV ratings.
Alabama.
Holy Mackerel, what you going to do here, Acquaviva?
Folks, you're listening to Radio Maria. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. The other voice you hear is Ed Billick. This is Faith and Sport, where we merge sport and virtue. Either way, welcome to the show today, whenever, wherever, and however you're checking us out. Ed, let's switch back to stuff that more involves character, morality, and ethics and so forth. And it comes back to, and the regular listeners of the show know this is my favorite topic, especially over the last year. But it has to do with the transgender argument and then the, men playing women's sports and all that. But something happened a couple weeks ago that I think is worth talking about. Okay, let's go back a couple years. Ed, in preparation for the national women's soccer team to play in the Olympics, they had just come off a World Cup victory and they were preparing for an Olympics, their games in the Olympics. And so what they did is they played a series of friendly matches to try to improve their game. And one of those games that was still to this day is underreported, I'm not sure why, was a 5-2 loss of a football club in Dallas, Texas. But these boys were 15 years or under. Now, remember, the girls, the best team, not only in the nation, but this is the best team in the world for women. The women's national team lost to this boys team of 15 and under in it was just a city of Dallas. This is club. So that means it wasn't a statewide program, certainly not an international program. They were just boys that were 15 in the state of Texas and the city of Dallas. Somebody on, I think, Twitter or X, as you called it, wrote Carly Lloyd, one of the then players for the national team, and said, is it true that you lost to these boys 15 or under? And she went on social media and said, yes, it's true. Thousands of people have already brought this up to me. And she went on to say, like, how good this particular team was, right?
I'm looking at it right here.
She said they were strong, they were fast, they were talented. And then ironically, to my argument, why men don't belong in women's sports, why boys don't belong in girls' sports, Ed, she went on to say, however, we went on to win with the same team that lost to these boys. We won the Olympics and we won the World Cup. And she clearly lost the point of her argument. The whole thing is that if you're going to lose, if you're going to be at the top of your game, they just come off a World Cup victory, they're going to go win the Olympics, the gold medal, and she's bragging about how good they are. But the fact that those boys were really talented, and of course that plays into my argument and so many people's argument that, yes, but this demonstrates that boys should not play against girls and not be competitive, not be allowed in the Olympics and the NCAA. Boys and girls sports should not be intermingled. It should be clearly segregated. And let's put a period on that once and for all. And I thought that particular situation did that. What's your commentary on that?
Yeah, and it just reinforces what we all believe. So, come on.
Yeah,
15
I love it.
Boys. Yeah, it's just the body structure, the makeup, all that adds to the strength of the team or lack thereof. So yeah,
that's right. I thought that was amazing exchange on social media, and
and this isn't some like high quality men's team. It's a bunch of 15-year-old boys.
That's right. That's right. They weren't even a statewide team. They were just a city team from Dallas area.
Absolutely.
Hey, on a light note, brother, our priest, Father Kirby, at Our Lady of Grace in Lancaster, South Carolina, was recently talking about the difference between Advent and Christmas, right? And he was talking about its preparation for the Lord's birth. This is a time of penitence. This is a time of preparation. And he was making it clear in his homily, Ed, the difference between Advent and Christmas, right? And he even talked about it. He just said, remember, if you put up a Christmas tree, that is lacking this preparation. So the earlier you put up that Christmas tree, the more this expectation of Christmas is going to be here, and you're celebrating Christmas already in the home and so forth. And I know this is an arguable point. That's not my point here, is to berate anybody who's put up lights and Christmas trees and bought presents and all that stuff. But it was so funny. About 3 weeks ago, and I'm not exaggerating, might have been 2. We were taking a walk in the neighborhood with a couple of our kids, and there was a Christmas tree already up this was before Thanksgiving. And I said to one of our girls, and I said, look at that Christmas tree. And they're like, oh yeah, that's our friends. And I forgot that was where two of their like girlfriends like to hang out. They're all like 12 years old, right? 10, 12 years old. And one of these girls that has their tree up for the last couple of weeks came into our house on Friday last week, and she was looking around. And her head was on a swivel. And I looked at her kind of like, is something wrong? And she goes, and she couldn't have been more innocent and more sincere. She goes, where's your Christmas tree? And of course, it wasn't even December 1st at the time. It was the end of November, but it wasn't even December 1st. And I said to her, we'll put it up soon. We just haven't put it up yet. Because to somebody that put it up the week before Thanksgiving, we're way late. I thought that was so funny and so interesting. She looked at me like, are you guys nuts? You don't have your Christmas tree up yet. It's almost December 1st.
It's funny you say that because Mass I was at yesterday, Father was saying it's time. The lights are on, the light of the world. Talked about everyone's getting ready. They're lighting up their house. They're getting ready. And you could say when's too early is early. I tell you, I play the other end. I don't care if you put your tree up on Thanksgiving Day. Don't take it down December 26th because right, Christmas goes to the Epiphany. We're celebrating the birth. I mean, when you have a baby, let's say John Acquaviva was born, January 5th. On January 6th, we don't forget about it. We're still celebrating the baby's birthday. Hello.
No, I like that.
Hello. That's a good point. Too close to the microphone when I talk loud here.
No. You're coming in loud and clear. You're doing well, brother. No, I know what you mean. That's actually a good point there. But his point, of course, is that that we can be too early, but in a way we can't be too late. But he was still talking about the season. He was talking about the liturgical calendar. He was talking about the seasons. And I thought it was a good homily. I thought it made a good point because there is a time of preparation and then there is a time to celebrate Christmas. And that's, to your point, that's exactly it. It's on the 26th. Trees shouldn't come down. Lights shouldn't come down. It's still the Christmas season. We should still be celebrating the birth.
It is absolutely time to be aware and watch out because we never know the day and time.
Absolutely. Bro, that's directly from yesterday's gospel, correct? Very good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, one more thing before we go. I thought this was interesting, and this has something to do with what we've talked about in the past, certainly what I've written about. I've had some articles published in this area. But just another minute to talk about Matt Rule, the head football coach of Nebraska. And he was in an interview after the season was over. I think it was the day of their final game of the season last week. And their quarterback's not very good. Their team wasn't very good this year. And he was asked by one of the reporters, hey, Coach Rule, should you go on to the transfer portal? And those who don't know what the transfer portal is, it's for people that are playing in college of any sport, and they can put themselves online basically to say, I'm willing to transfer from my school and come to your school. Will you contact me and make me an offer? That type of thing. Yeah. And so with this NIL, name, image, and likeness, which a lot of people are familiar with, we talked about it on this program. His response was brilliant, but yet sad. Ed, he said, well, I think we're going to need $1 to $2 million to attract him. Now think about that. Even 5 years ago, that would have been ludicrous for somebody to say this, but now it's common landscape.
You would have had an NCAA of violation had you made that comment.
That's right. Or he would have been accusing somebody of something. But it's gotten to the point of ridiculous, Ed, for you to get a decent quarterback. And some of those quarterbacks aren't great that are in the transfer portal. They're just decent. But that says something about the new landscape in college football and college sports in general. You need $1 to $2 million to attract a college athlete? Holy smokes. It used to be just language for the pro territory.
Was he not talking to his donor base? Wasn't he talking to the alums?
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about it from that standpoint, but he might have been making a call because that booster club, my guess, is as strong as anybody's in the country, man, that they have a wonderful, wonderful, literally booster and fan base, and they could raise that money probably if they wanted to.
It'd be funny if you could do a postmortem on this 50 years from now. Talk gambling in sports, talk where we are today compared to where we've come, where we've been before. Very, very interesting. I don't know what the future holds for college, but it always goes back to the money.
It's a shocker, brother. I'll tell you that. And of course, it almost in every time does go back to the money.
John, a good show. You got a guest coming up here in the second half, don't you?
I do. Folks, stay tuned for Deacon Bob Pierce. He's from the Diocese of Charleston, my diocese, permanent deacon at St. Mary Help of Christians in Aiken, South Carolina. He's going to talk about what he's been doing to merge these two things, faith and sport. So I'm looking forward to him being on the show. We're going to do weekend headlines after that. We'll follow the whole thing up with quick Q&A with Dr. A. Ed Billick, thank you for being a part of the program. Thank you for what you do for our faith and your church. Brother, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you bring to this show.
John, it's always a pleasure. May the rest of you have a wonderful Advent. Prepare your hearts and minds. Prepare your families for the coming of Christ. It's a great time of the year.
I appreciate you, brother. All right. Thank you for those words. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
See ya.
Okay, folks, we'll be right back with the second half of Faith in Sports. So just stay where you are. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Faith in Sport. This is where we look at sport through a Catholic lens. So whether you are a participant in sports, you're the athlete, you're the referee, you are a coach, you're administrator, whatever your involvement in sport, this is the show for you, because this is a regular sports show. We talk about sports. We talk about a bunch of different activities, but we weave in almost every part of the conversation has to do with ethics, character, morality, and in particular, teachings of the Catholic Church. Either way, we're welcome. We are thankful that you are a part of our program today. Joining us in 1 minute is going to be Deacon Bob Pierce. He's from the Diocese of Charleston. He's a permanent deacon at St. Mary Help of Christians in Aiken, South Carolina. And he's the organizer of Life Runners. And they started a new chapter there. I wanted to talk to him about that. I wanted him to educate you folks, talk to you folks about Life Runners. He's going to join us in just a few seconds here. After we get off the phone with Deacon Bob, we're going to do weekend headlines, bring you up to date on what's going on in the world of sport, and then we're going to end the whole thing with a quick Q&A with Dr. A. Hey, let's bring on our second half guest. He is Deacon Bob Pierce from the Diocese of Charleston, organizer of a chapter there called Life Runners. Deacon Pierce, welcome to Faith in Sport.
Well, thanks, John. I really appreciate this opportunity. I was pretty excited when I got your email.
No, this is neat. I live in Charlotte, but I commute into Lancaster, South Carolina. And so we get the monthly magazine for our diocese. And that's when I read about you. And I mean this, I always like reading that because I like to stay abreast of what's going on in the diocese and what's going on in the Catholic Church in general. And of course, the second I saw that article about you guys starting a chapter on Life Runners, my first thought was, wow, that's really neat. And my second immediate thought was, I'm going to have that man on my show.
Well, here we are.
Here we are, my man. So, Deacon Bob, tell us what Life Runners is. Now, in the past, I want to let folks know if this sounds somewhat familiar. Pat Castle, the founder and president of Life Runners, was on the show, but it's been a couple years. So remind us what Life Runners is.
Yeah, Life Runners is really the world's largest pro-life team. It's a team of people of all ages, literally from infants to senior citizens from across the country. They've now expanded into 46 nations. And the thing is, we witness for the dignity of the unborn by simply doing something as simple as wearing a jersey that says, "Remember the unborn." And so it's a strictly pro-life message. It's not an anti-abortion message. And kind of the motivating factor behind Life Runners is the statistic. They say that 78% of post-abortion women say if they would have encountered one supportive person or encouraging message, that they would have chosen life. And so we hope that by wearing our jerseys and being around in public, that we might be that one person.
That's amazing.
So yeah.
Say that stat again.
78% of post-abortion women had encountered somebody who would support them.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. And it shows, it's a call out to us, right? To be a part of this pro-life movement in some way. And you guys are doing a great job through this activity of running. So let's make this clear to the listener. So Life Runners, you guys will put on these shirts and have the pro-life messages on them. And do you guys like run as a group during the week to get in shape, or do you guys just get together for races like 5Ks and 10Ks and marathons? Tell us about that.
It's even simpler than that. one of the taglines for Life Runners is running optional, jersey required. So the thing is, we typically once a month, the Life Runners across the world on the first Wednesday, they gather wherever they're at.
Yep.
We'll pray, and then we'll go out and do something fun as a group. Pro-life people living a normal life, having fun. So we'll go out to a restaurant or ice cream. We've showed up at minor league baseball games, craft shows, the movies. Like, in next couple of weeks, we'll actually, for the fourth year in a row, go and do Christmas carols in downtown Aiken. And
I love it.
So just providing that simple witness of people who are pro-life and having fun. It was neat. One time we were in a restaurant and a guy came up and just gave one of our folks $100 and said, "Give this to the cause. I love what you're doing."
I love it. And then what I would have done, unfortunately, I would have taken 50 of it and put it toward the bill of that wonderful dinner. I'm, of course, teasing, folks. I would not have done that. Folks, you're listening to Radio Maria. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. This is Faith in Sport, where we apply our faith to all aspects of sport. My guest today is Deacon Bob Pierce. He's from the Diocese of Charleston, and he's started recently a chapter of an organization called Life Runners. He's telling us all about it. Deacon Bob, how did Life Runners first come to your attention? Was it months ago, years ago? How did you first find out about this?
Yeah, so actually in 2019, we went to the National Right to Life conference when it was held in Charleston, South Carolina.
Got it.
And so I went there and I was like, I knew I should be doing something more in the pro-life world, but I suspect, like you, my plate was pretty full.
Yeah.
And it was at that conference that Dr. Pat Castle spoke, and he talked about the origins and the methods of Life Runners. And of course, he's passionate, his commitment he's infectious, but it was the method that really captivated me. It's like, I can picture us doing this. It's not a huge time commitment.
Yep.
The level of commitment to get somebody involved is to wear a jersey in public. The bar is pretty low. It doesn't get much lower than that.
That's right.
Put a magnet on your car or whatever. But what I've also found is it engages people who have that low level of interest, but it also engages people at a higher level, people who, will sometimes go to abortion clinics and pray it there and petition our legislators. But we see people who are at that lower level entrance transition into something more substantial. So that's a beautiful thing to see as well.
Absolutely. Deacon Bob, when folks say that they don't really have a passion for this, or this is not their ministry, they haven't. Some Catholics, of course, even say, "I'm down the middle on this issue." They don't want to offend anybody. What could you do to encourage them to be a stronger voice? And I know there's a lot of different avenues they can take down this path, but what would you say to the folks that not fully aboard on the church's teaching on abortion?
Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, we have a lot of people who are a lot more passionate about this than I am. But at the same time, I realize that somebody needs to be an organizer. And, but a lot can be said. I can appeal to the reality of, what John Paul the Great said, the culture of death, the hardening of our culture as we disregard human life. You could point to just the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. The foundations of our country, that, the first inalienable right is the right to life. But, when I look at it, it eventually comes down to that fact that we're talking about a human life made in the image and likeness of God. And it's not a political issue. It's not a political football. The issue is this most fundamental element of human dignity, without which everything else unravels.
That's right.
That's a baby. And Jesus is very clear. He says, we heard this, 2 weeks ago, whatever you do for the least of these, you've done to me. And I don't think you can get much more least than a child in the womb of its mother.
Right. Deacon Bob, one of the ways that somebody put this in perspective to me, and I've probably said this, but only in like public speaking would I say this. I probably wouldn't say this to another individual one-on-one because I think it might be quite offensive to pet owners. But one of the things I've noticed about our culture is not only do they seem to care in their language, in their everyday actions, but also in the money they give, they seem to care more for dogs and cats that may be put down than they do for babies that may be killed. And I'm not here to articulate that and to make that strong stance. I don't think I'm very good at that. I try to talk about it when it develops, but I think that's one of the kind of shocking aspects about our culture
Yeah. I mean, Pope Francis actually spoke to that, I think, last year. He basically said that same thing, is that we kind of have our priorities a little bit out of line when we put so much emphasis on our pets and not so much so on family. It was a different statistic. It's not the unborn, but I preached this past week and I saw it right now in Canada. 1 in 25 people who die from euthanasia.
Man, that's sad. That's unbelievable. In fact, that we knew that was coming from a couple of years ago when there was like not only bills were passed, but there was like a push that almost this is like a dignified way to go.
Right.
Here's one of and I'll leave that point about pets with this is you can do both. You can care a great deal about a dog and a cat and iguana and your hamster. You can care a great deal about that, but you can also care about the unborn. Just choosing one doesn't mean you have to choose another. And I think that's where people get a little confused, or they don't want to kind of wrap their head around that. But I think that's one of the messages we would like to leave with folks today on this message about life, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, when you're talking about senior citizens, obviously their children have moved out. It's one thing, but it's the realization of, let's be honest, the love that you can give towards a child is very different than a pet. And the love that God can work in you as a human being, or you're not going to really get into the depths of God's love until you start to understand that sacrificial love. And that's why pets are wonderful. They give you love and they don't really put a lot of demands on you.
That's right. It's unconditional. See, brother, this is why I have you on this show. That like almost every one of your responses has been great, and it's much better than I could articulate that. And so, thank you for that. Hey, before we end our little segment, I want to know what gives you energy as a deacon. Like, what part of your ministry has really, tugs at your heart, has really given you energy, and the Spirit really kind of like awakens you to go do that. Is there one thing that kind of stands out, or a couple things that stand out in your ministry?
Well, it's almost a difficult one because so many things bring me joy. All right. I've been ordained actually over 21 years now.
Awesome.
And so the thing is with time, what I've started to realize is my relationship to the people of God changes. And hopefully as I mature in my diaconate, I'm able to enter more deeply into the lives of the people with whom I minister.
Sure.
So whether it's marriage prep or teaching RCIA, preaching, men's ministry, family ministry, our Hispanic community, life runners. All right, there's this opportunity where God's opening these doors to enter more deeply into their lives. And then, of course, he's not going to be outdone in his generosity. Lately, I've had the opportunity to actually start doing parish missions for free at small parishes who can't afford to bring in big name speakers, and self-published a book, to kind of give them some information, as part of that. So it's exciting. And that, I think that's what it is just I see the opportunity to enter more deeply into this communal life of people who are looking for a place, and looking for people who will walk with them.
That's wonderful. Brother, we just last week we had a deacon on. In fact, he happens to be the public address announcer for the Louisiana State LSU football and basketball. Isn't that neat? Deacon Dan
cool.
Bournet. I didn't have a chance to ask him this, but I don't even know if this is a fair question, but about how many hours do you devote to being a deacon per week? My guess is you're a full-time worker, like most deacons.
Yeah.
Right? Full-time job.
Yeah, I got a full-time job. All my children, I'm in grandchildren phase now, but
got it.
That's a hard one, but I would say I put in no more time than my pastor asks of me. I don't want to
embarrass you. I did not expect that answer. I was expecting something like so many hours, but I like that.
I don't look at it in that terms.
Because I don't even know this. And I've been a Catholic my whole life, and I know several deacons, but I've never asked them that question before. Is it safe to say 10 hours a week, maybe?
Yeah, maybe let's call it that. I mean, the prayer life, though, is the call to have a deeper prayer life is, that's a substantial personal part of being a deacon. I think is, right. They teach us you need to be first before you worry about the doing. So, it's just what it really does is, your faith, and I'm sure as your whole show is eventually encompasses all your life. So it's kind of hard. Yeah. I don't ever stop being a deacon.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Even at 3:00 in the morning, you're a deacon, Deacon Bob?
Yeah. Well, I remember I was doing my annual review with my boss, and he was Catholic. He goes to our parish, and I said, being a deacon, I can't behave in certain ways at work that maybe I could as not a deacon.
Of course.
I've given up the right to respond in certain ways and create a scandal.
Yeah, no, of course. No, God bless you for that, because so many people, they don't understand that concept, and you get that fully. So I appreciate that. Lastly, what's up next for Life Runners? What are you guys going to do next? Just put on a t-shirt, go for a run, or what's going on?
Well, we got the caroling coming up, so that's going to be in 2 weeks. So
will that be just a one night thing?
Yeah, we just show up in downtown Aiken and just we sing for about 30 minutes, and then we'll go to a restaurant. And
I love it. Okay, Deacon Bob, as an exercise physiologist, I'm going to encourage, because it's called Life Runners, and I can't, kind of like you can't leave your diaconate behind, I can't leave my physiology behind. I'm going to ask you guys to walk quickly, maybe even jog slowly from house to house when you guys go, just to bring up your heart rate a little bit and burn some calories. How's that?
Well, yeah, a few of us run marathons. Some of us run, but it's a small number.
Have you run a marathon, Deacon Bob?
I've run 2.
Oh, good for you. Is there another one in the future?
Probably not.
Okay.
I'll switch to halves. It's just it.
No, I don't blame you.
It's more. It's not even say it's mentally. It's spiritually. It demands so much of my attention that it undermines the prayer life.
No, I get that. It's unbelievable.
It's not the physical part. It's. I was surprised how. Every 3 weeks you need to do a long run. That's not that big of a deal.
It's a big deal to people who don't run, brother.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you for saying yes to the diaconate. Thank you for saying yes to running that chapter of Life Runners there at your parish in Aiken. Thank you for coming on the show, brother. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it too.
Okay. We'll see you next time. So there you go, folks. That was Deacon Bob Pierce, Diocese of Charleston. Check out Life Runners. In fact, one of the things I would suggest to you folks is look up Life Runners and see if that's something that you're interested in, something that maybe you're interested in leading, whatever the case is. So I want to thank not only Deacon Bob for doing what he does as a deacon, but for starting that chapter of Life Runners, and all those people out there throughout the world, as he mentioned, that actually do that. All right, folks, so here's what we're going to do. We just have a couple minutes left. We're going to do our weekend headlines, and then we are going to end with the whole quick Q&A with Dr. A. All right, folks, this weekend's headlines. This past weekend was Conference Championship Week in college football, and thus the Final Four, more formally known as the College Football Playoff. And it was determined that the following: University of Michigan, number 1, is going to go against number 4, Alabama, and number 2, Washington, will go against number 3, Texas. The big game, though, was University of Georgia losing to Alabama, Georgia's first loss in almost 3 seasons. It was an amazing run for Georgia. They're out of the playoff, but they're going to be playing against Florida State. In fact, speaking of Florida State, in the bowl game, that's the big story, that FSU did not make the playoff. And so if you missed that part of the program, be sure to catch us on Rewind here at Radio Maria. You guys can go to the website and then just listen to the show from start to finish, as Ed and I, my first guest, Ed Billick, talked about the playoff, in particular, FSU missing that. In the NHL, the season is well underway, and the Boston Bruins, the New York Rangers, the Colorado Avalanche, and the Vegas Golden Knights each lead their respective divisions. The big news, though, is my beloved Red Wings are doing much better than expected and are well above 500. Don't tell Ed this, but his Penguins are barely over 500. In college basketball, it's in the background of college football because it's just such a big discussion going on. The bowl games are coming up and so forth, but college basketball is playing on, and they're playing hard. Last week's number 1, Purdue, tumbled against unranked Northwestern. That shook up the most recent top 5. Currently, it stands as Arizona's number 1, followed by Purdue, Kansas, Marquette, and the University of Houston. By the way, the top 2 teams, Arizona and Purdue, 2 of the 5 I just mentioned, square off next week. So there you have it, sports news that may or may not change your life. All right, folks, we just have a couple minutes left here on the show. One of the things I do often, just about every week, especially for the last couple of weeks, is I do what's called the quick Q&A with Dr. A. And this is a question that has come to me in the past. and it is, what can sport administrators, including referees, do to improve the morality and overall experience within the sport? In other words, how can people that are involved within the sport, how can they make it a better experience for all? Well, this is, needless to say, a very big question to answer. It can be addressed by some vague answers, but the quick Q&A is, even though I only spent a couple minutes, I want to give you some pieces of information that you can take with you, either as a parent, a player, a referee, administrator, whatever the case is. Let me start, though, with making an analogy. We have 5 young kids, and often one of them speaks with, unfortunately, disrespect toward one another, or even toward my wife, Alicia, and I. And sometimes, and every parent likely has the same experience, Alicia and I don't really know how to handle that, at least some of the time, other than, quote, we don't like it when you talk that way, end of quote. So sometimes the only answer we have as parents when our kids are sassy to one another, if they're sassy to us, is simply to address the situation. Now, while this response from Alicia and I won't earn us any parenting awards, we feel the most important thing is to acknowledge the behavior as unacceptable. Administrators of sport, to an extent, have the same responsibilities. So do referees. So do coaches. Even though we don't know exactly what to say, even though we don't know exactly what the consequence should be, we should acknowledge that what was said or what was done was not appropriate, not appreciated, was disrespectful to the people involved, was disrespectful to the sport in general, and so forth. That is, the first issue is to simply address any poor behavior by athletes or fans, and perhaps even remove them from the situation. In other words, remove them from the gym, remove them from the field, or at least ask them, if necessary, to go to a different part of the park, sit in a different part of the stands. If they're being really negative, don't ask them to leave completely, but you can say, listen, as a favor for this process, this situation is turning negative. Please dismiss yourself. Go down toward the goal line, go down toward the right field line, go down or back up several steps away from everybody else that's drawing in some really negative behavior. Now, while bad behavior in sport is often complex and sometimes a volatile situation, like parenting, people in charge of sport have some obligation to hold those guilty accountable for their actions, even if it's just a look of disapproval or a firm comment that there is some expectation of decent behavior. So again, sometimes the only thing you can do is the best thing you can do. You can address the behavior as inappropriate, disrespectful, and you can do it in a respectful manner, in a firm but gentle manner, but you can let them know, and maybe they'll think next time about acting that way, whatever the case is. So there you go, the quick Q&A with Dr. A when it comes to what can people that are involved in sport do to improve the overall quality of the experience in sport, especially when parents and or others involved in the sport have gotten negative. All right, folks, we just have a moment left. As always, I like to end with a quote from a pope regarding sport, and it was the great St. John Paul II who said, when sports are played and understood in the right way, they are an extraordinary expression of a person's best inner energies and of his ability to overcome the difficulties of competition. Again, that's from St. John Paul II. Before we go, folks, I want to thank you. I want to thank Ed Billick, Deacon Bob Pierce for joining me on the show today. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Please join us next time here on Radio Maria for more Faith in Sport. And as always, St. Sebastian, pray for us.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.